Captain Zorax of the Krellian Empire stared at the human prisoner with disgust. The small figure sat chained to the metal chair in the interrogation chamber, looking impossibly delicate under the harsh white lights. Her pale skin seemed paper-thin, and her slender frame appeared ready to snap at the slightest touch. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her breathing came in shallow gasps. "This is what the humans send as their champion." Zorax's voice rumbled through his translator, the sound echoing off the sterile walls. "A sick child?" The girl raised her head slowly, meeting his gaze with startling green eyes. She couldn't have been more than 20 Earth years old, with auburn hair that hung limp around her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I'm Arya Chen. I represent Earth in the trial of strength." Zorax's mandibles clicked in amusement. The trial of strength was an ancient galactic tradition. When one species challenged another's right to exist, combat would decide their fate. The Krellians had issued this challenge after humanity's rapid expansion into space. Now, looking at their chosen fighter, Zorax felt almost insulted. "The humans mock us with this offering," he growled to his aide, Lieutenant Vex. "Look at her. She can barely hold her head up." It was true. Arya seemed to struggle just to sit upright. Her hands trembled as she tried to brush hair from her face, and a coughing fit seized her for several moments. When it passed, she wiped blood from her lips with the back of her hand. "Perhaps they hope for mercy," Vex suggested. "Sending someone so obviously weak." The Krellians were not known for mercy. Standing nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor covering their insectoid bodies and 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, they were the galaxy's most feared warriors. Their military had conquered 17 star systems, and their gladiatorial traditions went back millennia. "There will be no mercy," Zorax declared. "Weakness deserves only death." The trial would take place on Nexus Station, a neutral ground where representatives from dozens of species had gathered to witness humanity's fate. The arena could hold 50,000 spectators, and every seat was filled. Some came to see justice served to the upstart humans. Others hoped to witness an upset that would shake the galaxy's power structure. In the medical bay, Dr. Sarah Martinez finished her examination of Arya with growing concern. The young woman's vitals were all wrong. Her heart rate was irregular, her blood pressure dangerously low, and her muscle mass seemed insufficient to support even her slight frame. "Arya, I have to ask again," Dr. Martinez said, setting down her scanner. "Are you sure about this? Your condition is—" "I know what my condition is," Arya interrupted softly. "I've lived with it my whole life." Dr. Martinez had read Arya's file. Born with a rare genetic disorder that affected her connective tissues and cardiovascular system, she'd spent most of her childhood in hospitals. The condition made her bones fragile, her joints unstable, and her stamina nearly non-existent. By all medical logic, she should be bedridden, not preparing to fight for humanity's survival. "Then why?" the doctor asked. "Why did you volunteer for this?" Arya was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, there was something different in her voice. Something that made Dr. Martinez step back involuntarily. "Because I'm the only one who can win." The statement should have sounded ridiculous coming from someone who looked ready to collapse. Instead, it sent chills down the doctor's spine. There was absolute certainty in those quiet words, a confidence that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than her frail body. Admiral Hayes, humanity's military commander, burst into the medical bay. His face was flushed with anger and desperation. "Chen, this is madness," he said. "I've been watching the Krellian champion train. Vorthak the Destroyer has never lost a fight. He's killed 43 opponents in the arena. His claws can slice through steel, and his exoskeleton can withstand plasma fire." Arya nodded calmly. "I know. I've studied his techniques." Studied? Hayes laughed bitterly. This isn't a classroom exercise. This is life or death for our entire species. If you lose, humanity becomes slaves to the Krellian Empire. Our children will be raised as laborers in their mines. I won't lose, Arya said simply. Hayes stared at her in disbelief. How can you be so certain? Look at yourself. You can barely stand without help. For the first time, Arya smiled. It was a small, sad expression that somehow made her look even more fragile. Appearances can be deceiving, Admiral. As if to prove his point, Arya tried to stand and immediately swayed. Dr. Martinez rushed to steady her, feeling how light she was, how her bones seemed to shift under her skin. This is suicide, Hayes muttered. I should call off the trial, accept slavery rather than watch you die. You can't, Arya reminded him. The challenge has been issued and accepted. Galactic law is clear. And besides, she added, her voice growing stronger, I really am the right choice. The viewing gallery buzzed with conversation as representatives from across the galaxy took their seats. The Altarians, with their crystalline bodies, reflected the arena lights like living prisms. The Thessarian delegates kept their environmental suits sealed, their gaseous forms swirling behind transparent barriers. Even the mysterious Void Walkers had sent an observer, its dark form seeming to absorb light itself. Ambassador Keth of the Galactic Council stood to address the assembly. His voice carried clearly through the translation systems. We gather today to witness the trial of strength between the Krellian Empire and the human species of Earth. By ancient law, this combat will determine whether humanity retains its independence or submits to Krellian rule. A hush fell over the crowd as the arena doors began to open. From one side emerged Vorthak the Destroyer, and the spectators gasped at his imposing presence. He stood 4 meters tall, his black exoskeleton gleaming with ceremonial war paint. His 4 arms moved in perfect coordination, each ending in claws that looked capable of tearing through armor. Bone spikes jutted from his shoulders and elbows, and his mandibles clicked in a rhythm that spoke of barely contained violence. From the opposite door came Arya, and the reaction was immediate. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. Many species leaned forward, unsure if their translators were malfunctioning. This couldn't be humanity's champion. Arya walked slowly to the center of the arena, each step seeming to require tremendous effort. She wore simple training clothes that hung loose on her frame. No armor, no weapons, just a girl who looked like she belonged in a medical ward rather than a fighting arena. The contrast was so stark, it seemed like a cruel joke. Vorthak's form blocked out the lights above him, while Arya cast barely any shadow at all. When they stood face to face in the center of the arena, the top of her head barely reached his lower chest. "This is your champion?" Vorthak's voice boomed through his translator, the sound making Arya wince. "The humans insult me with this offering." "I'm sorry you feel that way," Arya replied, her voice so quiet the arena's audio systems had to amplify it for the crowd to hear. Vorthak studied her for a moment, his compound eyes reflecting confusion and growing anger. "Are you here to surrender? To beg for mercy on behalf of your pathetic species?" "No," Arya said, still speaking in that same soft tone. "I'm here to fight you." The Krellian champion threw back his head and roared with laughter, a sound that echoed through the arena like thunder. "Fight? You can barely remain standing. This is not combat, it is execution." Ambassador Keth raised his hand for silence. "The combat will proceed according to ancient law. No weapons, no armor, fight until one yields or dies. Champions, take your positions." Vorthak moved to his starting mark with fluid grace, his forearms spreading wide in a classic Krellian battle stance. The bone spikes along his arms gleamed under the lights, and his claws extended to their full length. Arya walked to her mark much more slowly. Halfway there, she stumbled and caught herself, drawing concerned gasps from some spectators and derisive laughter from others. When she finally reached her position, she simply stood there, arms at her sides, looking for all the world like she was waiting for a bus rather than preparing for mortal combat. "Begin," Ambassador Keth declared. Vorthak charged immediately, his powerful legs propelling his massive frame forward with surprising speed. His intention was clear: end this farce quickly with a single devastating blow. His upper right arm drew back, claws gleaming, ready to cleave through his opponent's fragile form. But as he reached striking distance, something impossible happened. Arya moved. It wasn't the clumsy, uncertain movement she'd shown walking to the arena. This was something else entirely. She flowed like water around Vorthak's strike, her body bending in ways that should have been anatomically impossible. What looked like weakness became fluid grace, her fragile frame moving with a precision that defied belief. Vorthak's claws whistled through empty air as Arya slipped past him like smoke. She touched him briefly as she passed, just the lightest contact with her fingertips against a joint in his exoskeleton. Vorthak stumbled and nearly fell, his left leg suddenly refusing to support his weight properly. Confusion flashed across his features as he turned to face her again. "What did you do?" he demanded. Arya stood several meters away, looking as fragile as ever. "Pressure point. Your nervous system isn't that different from ours." The arena erupted in confused chatter. What had just happened? How had the human moved like that? And why was the mighty Vorthak favoring his left leg? Vorthak snarled and attacked again, this time more cautiously. He kept his center of gravity lower, his movements more controlled. But again, Arya seemed to anticipate his every move. She ducked under a horizontal swipe, rolled between his legs, and touched another specific point on his exoskeleton. This time, Vorthak's upper left arm went numb, hanging uselessly at his side. "Impossible," breathed the Altarian ambassador. "How does she know our anatomy better than we do?" In the human delegation, Dr. Martinez was watching with growing amazement. Arya's movements were unlike anything in human martial arts. Each technique seemed perfectly adapted to exploit Krellian physiology, as if she had studied their species for decades. But that was impossible. Humans had only encountered the Krellians 6 months ago, and Arya had been in medical facilities for most of that time. When could she have learned such specific knowledge? The fight continued, and with each exchange, more spectators began to realize they were witnessing something extraordinary. Arya never struck with force. Instead, she touched, pressed, and redirected. Each contact disabled another part of Vorthak's body, like she was methodically shutting down a complex machine. The mighty Krellian warrior, undefeated champion of his people, was being dismantled by a girl who looked like she might collapse at any moment. Vorthak roared in frustration as his third arm went dead from another precise touch. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the champion who had never known defeat struggled against an opponent who seemed to be falling apart even as she fought. Arya's breathing was becoming more labored. Blood trickled from the corner of her mouth, and her pale skin had taken on an alarming grayish tint. Yet somehow she continued to move with that impossible grace, flowing around attacks that should have turned her into mist. "How?" Vorthak gasped, backing away from her. "How do you know where to strike?" Arya wiped blood from her lips, her hand trembling with exhaustion. "I studied," she said simply. "Studied what? We've barely met your species." For the first time since the fight began, Arya's expression changed. Something flickered in her green eyes, a depth that seemed far older than her 20 years. "I studied everything," she whispered. In the medical bay's archives, a computer terminal flickered to life, unnoticed by anyone. Files began scrolling past at impossible speed. Krellian anatomy texts, Altarian pressure point diagrams, Thessarian energy flow patterns, combat techniques from 17 different warrior cultures. The data streamed past faster than any human could possibly read or comprehend. But Arya Chen was not any human. "She's accessing the station's databases," Admiral Hayes said, his voice filled with wonder as he watched from the viewing gallery. "But how? She doesn't have any cybernetic implants." Dr. Martinez stared at the display showing Arya's vital signs. Her brain activity was off the charts, showing patterns that shouldn't be possible for a human mind. "Maybe she doesn't need them," she whispered. Back in the arena, Vorthak was growing desperate. He had one functioning arm left, and his movements had become clumsy and predictable. The crowd that had come to see humanity crushed was watching their greatest champion being systematically defeated by someone who looked ready to die. "What are you?" Vorthak demanded. Arya was quiet for a long moment, swaying on her feet. When she spoke, her voice was so soft the arena had to strain to hear her. "I'm dying," she said. "I've been dying my whole life. Do you know what that teaches you?" Vorthak said nothing, his compound eyes fixed on her with a mixture of rage and growing fear. "It teaches you to observe, to think, to find strength where others see only weakness." Arya took a shaky step forward. "While other children played, I watched. Medical documentaries, combat sports, nature programs showing how animals fight. Everything." The revelation rippled through the crowd. The Altarian ambassador leaned forward in his crystalline seat. "She's saying she learned martial arts from entertainment?" "Not just learned," corrected the Thessarian delegate, his gaseous form swirling with excitement. "Adapted. Each technique modified for the physiology she was fighting." Arya moved again, and this time Vorthak couldn't even see how she did it. One moment she was meters away, the next she was inside his guard, her small hand pressed against a nerve cluster at the base of his neck. Vorthak's last functioning arm went limp. "I memorized the fighting styles of every species I could find," Arya continued, stepping back. "Boxing from Earth, the flowing movements of Altarian crystal dancing, the pressure point techniques of the Void Walkers, the energy redirection methods of the Thessarians." She stumbled and caught herself against the arena wall, leaving a small smear of blood where her hand touched. "And when I learned about this trial, I studied Krellian anatomy for 6 months. Every nerve cluster, every joint, every weakness." Vorthak stood paralyzed, only his head still under his control. "Impossible. The human mind cannot contain so much information." "You're right," Arya agreed. "It can't." The implications hit the crowd like a shockwave. Murmurs of disbelief and growing fear spread through the viewing gallery. If what she was suggesting was true, if humans could somehow absorb and process information beyond the limits of their biology. "I pushed my brain too hard," Arya continued, her voice growing weaker. "The same condition that makes my body fragile. It also removed the normal limits on neural activity. I can process information faster than any computer, but it's burning me out." Dr. Martinez was frantically checking readings in the medical bay. Arya's brain activity was still climbing, reaching levels that should have caused immediate seizures and death. Somehow, her unusual neurology was allowing her to function at superhuman cognitive levels, but the cost was enormous. "She's overclocking her brain," Dr. Martinez said to Admiral Hayes. "Like running a computer processor beyond its safe limits. It gives incredible performance, but it destroys the hardware," Hayes finished grimly. In the arena, Arya was explaining the truth to her paralyzed opponent. "Every fighting style ever recorded, every pressure point technique, every weakness of every species, I absorbed it all, adapted it all, and now I carry the combined martial knowledge of the entire galaxy." Vorthak's eyes showed terror now. "You're a monster." "No," Arya said sadly. "I'm just a sick girl who found a way to be useful." The crowd was in an uproar. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting questions and demands. How many humans could do this? Was this some kind of new weapon? A biological evolution? Ambassador Keth called for order, but his own voice carried a tremor of concern. The trial continues. Does the Krellian champion yield? Vorthak tried to speak, but even his voice was failing as the nerve strikes took their full effect. Arya walked over to him slowly, each step an obvious struggle. "I could kill you now," she said quietly, so only he could hear. "I know exactly where to touch to stop your heart, but I won't." She reached up and pressed a point on his neck. Sensation began to return to Vorthak's limbs, starting with his arms. "Why?" he gasped. "Because you're a warrior, and you deserve better than being executed by a dying girl." Arya stepped back, raising her voice for the crowd. "I offer terms. Single combat to determine the winner, but with conditions." The arena fell silent. "I will fight you with only human techniques. No alien knowledge, no anatomical advantages. Just the martial arts of Earth." Arya's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees. "If I win, humanity remains free. If you win, we'll accept servitude." Vorthak flexed his arms as feeling returned. He could have struck her down immediately, but something in her offer gave him pause. "Why would you handicap yourself?" "Because this isn't really about who's stronger," Arya said, struggling back to her feet. "It's about proving that every species has something valuable to offer the galaxy, even the weak ones." The Krellian champion considered this. His pride had been wounded by his earlier defeat, but there was honor in her proposal, a chance to win or lose on equal terms. "I accept your terms," he announced. Ambassador Keth looked uncertain. "This is highly irregular. The trial has already begun according to the traditional rules." "Then let tradition be flexible," called out the Thessarian delegate. "I want to see what the humans can do without borrowed knowledge." Murmurs of agreement came from around the viewing gallery. The spectacle was unprecedented, and curiosity was overcoming political concerns. "Very well," Ambassador Keth declared. "The trial will continue under the proposed conditions. Human martial arts only." Arya wiped blood from her mouth and took a fighting stance that was recognizably from Earth. It was a basic boxing guard, the kind taught to beginners in gymnasiums across human space. Vorthak moved into his own traditional Krellian stance, all four arms spread wide, claws extended. "Begin the second phase," Ambassador Keith announced. This time, when Vorthak charged, Arya met him head-on. No supernatural grace, no impossible movements. Just a small human girl with failing health throwing punches at an armored giant. Her first punch bounced harmlessly off Vorthak's exoskeleton. Her second barely made him pause, but she kept fighting, using footwork and timing that spoke of Earth's boxing traditions, modified for someone with her physical limitations. The crowd watched in fascination as the fight became something entirely different. This wasn't the systematic dismantling they'd witnessed before. This was raw determination against overwhelming odds. Arya's strategy became clear as the fight continued. She was using her size and fragility as weapons. Every time Vorthak's overwhelming strength connected, she would roll with the impact, turning potentially deadly blows into glancing strikes. Her weakness became a form of defense, but the cost was visible. Each contact left her more battered, more bloodied. Her breathing became ragged and her movements slower. "She can't win this way," Admiral Hayes said. "She's too damaged, too weak." Dr. Martinez nodded grimly. "Her heart is failing. The strain of the earlier cognitive overload combined with the physical trauma. She has maybe 5 minutes before complete cardiovascular collapse." Yet Arya kept fighting, and slowly, something remarkable began to happen. Vorthak, despite his massive advantages, was becoming frustrated. His opponent refused to stay down. Every time he thought he had landed a decisive blow, she would get back up and continue fighting. "Why won't you yield?" he demanded after another exchange left Arya on the ground, blood pooling beneath her. She pushed herself up on trembling arms. "Because yielding means the end of my species' freedom, and I won't let that happen." For the first time, respect began to show in Vorthak's compound eyes. The arena had grown quiet, except for the sound of Arya's labored breathing and the soft impact of her feet on the metal floor. She stood swaying, her training clothes torn and stained with blood, but her green eyes still burned with determination. Vorthak studied his opponent with growing confusion. In all his years of combat, he had never faced anyone like this. Her technique was good but not extraordinary. Her strength was laughable compared to his own. Yet something about her refusal to surrender was beginning to affect him in ways he couldn't understand. "You are dying," he stated, his voice no longer carrying the earlier mockery. "I can see it, smell it. Why do you not yield and seek medical attention?" Arya wiped blood from her mouth with the back of her hand. "Because some things are more important than living." The words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the Krellian warrior culture stood for. Strength was supposed to triumph. The weak were supposed to bow before the strong. That was the natural order. But this human girl was rewriting those rules with every breath she took. Vorthak attacked again, but this time his strikes lacked their earlier viciousness. He could have ended the fight at any moment, yet something held him back. Perhaps it was the way she never flinched, never showed fear, even when his claws came within inches of ending her life. Arya dodged and weaved, using every boxing technique she had ever learned. Her footwork was beautiful despite her failing body, a dance of survival that spoke to something deeper than mere training. This was human spirit made manifest. The spectators watched in stunned silence as the fight entered its final phase. It was no longer about who would win. Everyone could see that Arya was near collapse. Her heart was visibly struggling. Her breathing came in sharp gasps, and her legs threatened to give out with each step. But she wouldn't quit. "In the name of the Void," whispered the Void Walker observer, its dark form rippling with what might have been emotion. "Look at her." The Altarian ambassador's crystalline body was resonating with harmonics of amazement. "She knows she cannot win, yet she continues. This is what they call human spirit," said the Thessarian delegate, his gaseous form swirling with colors that indicated deep thought. "I had heard stories, but to witness it—" Admiral Hayes was gripping the viewing gallery railing so hard his knuckles had gone white. "Come on, Arya. Just a little longer." Dr. Martinez couldn't watch anymore. The medical readings showed organ failure beginning across multiple systems. Arya should have been unconscious. By every medical standard she knew, the girl should have been dead. "How is she still standing?" Dr. Martinez asked. "Because she's human," Admiral Hayes said simply. "And humans don't know when to quit." In the arena, Vorthak had stopped attacking altogether. He stood motionless, all four arms at his sides, staring at the girl who refused to fall. "I don't understand," he said. "You cannot win. Your body is failing, yet you continue to fight." "Why?" Arya leaned against the arena wall for support, her breathing coming in short gasps. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of the massive space. "Because that's what humans do. We fight when we can't win. We stand when we can't stand. We protect what matters to us, even if it kills us." She pushed herself off the wall, standing on legs that shook with exhaustion. "You asked me what I am? I'm not a warrior. I'm not a weapon. I'm just a girl who's too stubborn to quit." Something changed in Vorthak's expression. For the first time since the combat began, uncertainty flickered in his compound eyes. "Your species conquers through strength," Arya continued, taking a step toward him. "You've built an empire by being the strongest, the most fearsome. But you know what? Strength isn't just about how hard you can hit. Another step, and now she was close enough that Vorthak could have killed her with a casual swipe. Sometimes strength is knowing when to stop hitting. Vorthak stared down at her, this fragile human who had somehow turned his world view upside down. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've already won," Arya said. "You've proven you're stronger than me. Everyone can see that. But now you have a choice. You can kill me and make my species into slaves, or you can show the galaxy that the Krellians are strong enough to be merciful." The arena erupted in shocked murmurs. Representatives from dozens of species leaned forward, waiting to see how the great Krellian champion would respond to such an unprecedented challenge. Vorthak's claws extended and retracted repeatedly, a sign of deep internal conflict. His entire culture, his entire sense of self, was built around the principle that might made right. Yet this dying human girl was asking him to transcend everything he had ever been taught. "You would trust the mercy of your enemies?" he asked. "I would trust the honor of a true warrior," Arya replied. The words hit Vorthak like a physical blow. Honor. It was the cornerstone of Krellian society, even more fundamental than strength. And somehow this human had found a way to challenge his honor without questioning his strength. "If I show mercy," Vorthak said slowly, "my own people will call me weak. Then show them you're strong enough not to care what they call you." Arya swayed on her feet, and for a moment it looked like she might collapse. But she steadied herself and met his gaze directly. "The galaxy is watching, Vorthak the Destroyer. You can be remembered as the champion who crushed the weak, or as the warrior who was strong enough to protect them. Which legend would you rather leave behind?" Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of Arya's labored breathing. The crowd held its breath, waiting for the decision that would reshape galactic politics. Finally, Vorthak spoke, his voice carrying clearly through the arena's speakers. "I yield." The words hit the crowd like a thunderbolt. Confused shouts erupted from the Krellian delegation. Other species sat in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Ambassador Keth rose slowly from his seat. "Did the Krellian champion just—" "I yield," Vorthak repeated, louder this time. "The human has fought with honor. Her species has proven their worth." Arya smiled, an expression of pure relief and joy, and then her legs finally gave out. She collapsed to the arena floor, unconscious before she hit the ground. Medical teams rushed onto the arena floor as pandemonium erupted in the viewing gallery. Dr. Martinez worked frantically to stabilize Arya's failing vital signs, while Vorthak stood guard over the medical team, ensuring no one interfered with their work. "Is she—" he asked quietly. "She'll live," Dr. Martinez said, not looking up from her equipment. "Barely. She's pushed her body far beyond its limits, but humans are surprisingly resilient." "Yes," Vorthak said, looking down at the unconscious girl who had changed everything. "They are." In the viewing gallery, representatives from across the galaxy were engaged in heated discussions. The implications of what had just happened were staggering. A species had won their freedom not through superior strength, but through a demonstration of unbreakable will. "This changes everything," the Altarian ambassador said. "If the humans can fight like this, inspire this kind of response." "They're not just another species," agreed the Thessarian delegate. "They're something new, something that could reshape the galactic order." The Voidwalker observer remained silent, but its form had taken on patterns that suggested deep contemplation. Admiral Hayes watched as the medical team carefully transported Arya from the arena. "What happens now?" he asked Ambassador Keth. Now the galaxy has to decide what to make of humanity," Keth replied. "You've just proven that strength comes in forms we never imagined." Captain Zorax of the Krellian military stood in the viewing gallery, his mandibles clicking in what his species used to express confused admiration. That fragile little creature just defeated our greatest champion without landing a single decisive blow. She didn't defeat him, corrected his aide, Lieutenant Vex. She convinced him to defeat himself. Is there a difference? Lieutenant Vex considered this. Perhaps that's what makes humans dangerous. 3 days later, Arya woke up in the medical bay of Nexus Station. Her body was still weak, but the immediate crisis had passed. Dr. Martinez sat beside her bed, monitoring her recovery. "How do you feel?" the doctor asked. "Like I got hit by a transport shuttle," Arya said, managing a weak smile. "Did we win?" "You won," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "Humanity remains free." Arya nodded and closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, there was something different in her expression. The terrible certainty, the inhuman focus, had faded. She looked like what she was, a tired, sick young woman who had done something impossible. "Good," she said simply. "Arya, what you did in that arena, how did you know it would work?" Arya was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't. I just knew I had to try." The medical bay's doors opened, and Vorthak entered. His massive form filled the doorway, but his posture was respectful rather than threatening. He approached Arya's bedside carefully. "I came to check on your condition," he said. "Thank you," Arya replied. "That means a lot." Vorthak studied her for a moment. "You knew, didn't you? From the beginning. You knew you couldn't defeat me through strength." "Yes." "Then why did you agree to fight?" Arya met his compound gaze directly. "Because sometimes the only way to win is to change what winning means." Vorthak's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter or admiration. "The Krellian Council has voted. We withdraw our challenge to humanity's independence. More than that, we offer an alliance." "Why?" "Because you taught us something we had forgotten. True strength protects the weak rather than destroying them. My people want to learn this from yours." After Vorthak left, Arya lay in her medical bed, staring at the ceiling. The immediate crisis was over, but she knew this was just the beginning. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy in a way no one could ignore. "What happens now?" she asked Dr. Martinez. "Now you rest and recover. You've done enough for one lifetime." Arya smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. "I won't recover, you know. Not really. The damage to my body, the strain I put on my brain. I have maybe a year left." Dr. Martinez wanted to argue, to offer hope, but the medical readings didn't lie. Arya's body was breaking down at an accelerated rate, the price of her impossible performance in the arena. "I'm sorry," the doctor said. "Don't be. I always knew I was dying. At least now I've made it count for something." 6 months later, Arya Chen died peacefully in her sleep at a medical facility on Earth. The galaxy mourned the passing of the fragile girl who had changed everything. Representatives from dozens of species attended her memorial service, and even the mysterious Void Walkers sent a delegation. Vorthak the Destroyer gave the eulogy. "She was the weakest warrior I ever faced," he said, his words translated into every language represented. "And the strongest person I ever met. She taught us that true strength lies not in the power to destroy, but in the wisdom to know when destruction is unnecessary." A monument was erected on Nexus Station, in the very arena where the trial had taken place. It bore a simple inscription: "Arya Chen. She taught the galaxy that even the fragile can be unbreakable." But perhaps the greatest monument to her legacy was the change she had inspired. The Krellian Empire began protecting smaller species rather than conquering them. Other powerful civilizations followed suit, and the concept of might makes right began to fade from galactic politics. Humanity had earned its place among the stars not through superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but through the simple demonstration that every species, no matter how fragile, had something valuable to contribute. And in medical facilities across human space, other children with rare conditions and failing bodies began to dream of ways they too might change the galaxy. Arya Chen had shown them that weakness could become strength, that limitations could become advantages, and that sometimes the most important battles were won not by the strongest warriors, but by those brave enough to redefine what victory means. The girl who looked too fragile to survive had proven that humans were too stubborn to quit, too creative to be conquered, and too determined to be broken. In doing so, she had given her species something more valuable than freedom. She had given them hope and the unshakable knowledge that even in their weakest moment, humanity could find a way to stand strong.